The ride home passed in uncomfortable silence, the kind that forms when people who usually can't stop talking suddenly have too much to say and no idea how to say it. "It might not be what it looks like," Mia finally offered as we pulled into our driveway, her voice carefully neutral in a way that suggested she thought it was exactly what it looked like but was trying to spare my feelings. "Maybe," I agreed, though the image of that hand on Caroline's back seemed burned into my retinas. "What are you going to do?" she asked, turning off the engine but making no move to exit the car. "Are you going to confront her?" I stared through the windshield at our house. The warm glow of lights we'd left on, the carefully maintained flower beds Caroline insisted on planting herself every spring despite her notorious lack of gardening skills, the basketball hoop I'd installed when Mia was 10, and determined to make the WNBA before she discovered calculus and existential dread. Our life, contained in 2,800 square feet of polished hardwood and comfortable furniture, and carefully curated family photos. "I don't know," I admitted. "I need to think." Mia nodded, uncharacteristically solemn. "For what it's worth, I still don't get it. Mom's not, she's always been so, I don't know, principled. Like, annoyingly ethical about everything. Remember how she made me return that extra $5 when the cashier gave me too much change at the grocery store, and then lectured me for 20 minutes about integrity?" I managed a small smile at the memory. "That does sound like your mother, so this doesn't make sense. Unless," she trailed off, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Unless we're still missing something." "Maybe," I said again, though I wasn't sure what that something could possibly be, short of Caroline having an identical twin with considerably looser moral standards. "I think we need more information," Mia declared with renewed determination. "This was just one observation. We need, corroborating evidence, multiple data points." "Mia," I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 47 years. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I think I need to handle this like an adult." "Talk to your mother directly." "Fine," she conceded, though her tone suggested this was a tactical error of monumental proportions. "But at least wait until we have a bit more to go on." "Give me until Saturday?" I should have said no, should have insisted on adult communication and transparency. Instead, I found myself nodding, a silent agreement to extend our investigation for 3 more days. After all, what difference could 3 days make? Quite a lot, as it turned out. Thursday passed in a fog of distraction. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, claiming a migraine that wasn't entirely fictitious given the pounding in my head. I spent the day alternating between staring at my phone, contemplating texts I didn't send, staring at old photos, searching for signs I might have missed, and staring at the ceiling, wondering how one restructures an entire life at 47. Mia texted periodic updates from school, each one pinging with the false promise of clarifying information. Asked Mom casual Q about where book club meets. She said different places, then changed subject to my calc test. Suspicious, searched Michael on Mom's public Insta. No relevant results except weird pottery page guy who liked her vacation pics from 2 hours ago. Checked family credit card statement online. Mom's card shows Morton's charge from last night. $127.42. Expensive for just dinner. Unless, OMG. Maybe the speaking coach thing is real and she's expensing it to the firm. Tax fraud? None of it helped. None of it erased the image of that man's hand on Caroline's back, the sound of her unreserved laughter, the warm intimacy of their body language as they walked toward a restaurant where a $127 dinner wouldn't raise eyebrows. By Friday, I'd graduated, from shock to a dull anger that simmered beneath mundane conversations about weekend plans and grocery lists. Caroline seemed completely normal, neither particularly attentive nor notably distant, which somehow made everything worse. Had she always been this good at compartmentalizing? At maintaining separate realities without visible effort? Had I ever really known her at all? Saturday arrived with Mia's promised comprehensive evidence portfolio, delivered to my home office, with the solemnity of a national security briefing while Caroline was at her monthly spa appointment. "I've compiled everything we have," she announced, spreading papers across my desk with a flourish. "And I've developed a theory." I eyed the meticulously organized documentation. Spreadsheets, screenshots, bulleted lists, even a hand-drawn timeline, decorated with colored markers in a way that suggested my daughter might have missed her calling as a crime scene analyst. "A theory," I repeated, not entirely sure I wanted to hear it. "Yes." She took a deep breath. "I think Mom is preparing for a major case presentation with a professional coach named Michael, possibly from the Seattle Center for Public Speaking, and she's hiding it because she's embarrassed about needing help with something she thinks she should already be good at." I blinked, processing this. That's actually quite reasonable, but it doesn't explain everything. The dinner at Morton's, the hand on her back, the burgundy lipstick. "The lipstick is what made me figure it out," Mia said triumphantly, pointing to a section of her timeline labeled Cosmetic Evidence. "Mom only wears that specific shade when she's doing something that makes her nervous, but that she wants to appear confident about, like surprise parties or high-stakes presentations." I frowned, considering this. But why the secrecy? Why not just tell us she's working with a coach? "Because it's Mom," Mia said, as if explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. "She'd rather die than admit she needs help with anything. Remember when she tried to assemble that IKEA bookcase by herself and ended up with 17 extra screws and something that looked like abstract furniture art?" I did remember. Caroline had stubbornly refused my offers of assistance, insisting she could follow the instructions perfectly well. "Thank you very much." We'd ended up donating the misshapen result to Mia's middle school art department, where it had been repurposed as a postmodern sculpture titled Hubris in Swedish. "Still," I said, not quite ready to abandon my suspicions, "that doesn't explain why they looked so comfortable with each other. The touching, the laughter." Mia rolled her eyes. "Dad, people can be friendly without having affairs. And look at this." She pointed to a printout of what appeared to be a professional biography. "I found him, Michael Sullivan, founder of the Seattle Center for Public Speaking, former theater director turned executive communication coach, specializes in helping high-performing professionals overcome presentation anxiety and connect authentically with their audiences." I studied the photo. It was him, the man from Wednesday night. Distinguished, confident, exactly the type of person who might charge exorbitant rates to teach nervous professionals how to sound like they knew what they were doing. "It fits," Mia continued, pointing to another page in her evidence portfolio. "Mom's big case is scheduled for trial in 3 weeks. The Westlake development thing? It's all over her calendar with like 1,000,000 preparation notes. And look at these," she added, sliding forward printouts of what appeared to be Caroline's recent credit card statements. "Weekly charges to SCPS coaching going back 2 months, plus dinners at Morton's. Always on Wednesdays, always around the same amount." I raised an eyebrow. "You accessed your mother's credit card statements?" Mia had the grace to look slightly abashed. "The password is my birthday and your anniversary combined. Not exactly Fort Knox security, but that's not the point. The point is, I think Mom's just embarrassed about needing public speaking coaching, especially since she's a literal trial attorney who speaks in public for a living." I sat back in my chair, letting this new narrative settle alongside the one I'd been constructing in my head. It made sense. It fit the evidence. It aligned with Caroline's known character traits, her pride, her perfectionism, her reluctance to acknowledge perceived weaknesses. It was, in short, a far more plausible explanation than a sudden mid-life affair with a handsome speaking coach. "But the burgundy lipstick," I said, returning to the detail that had started this whole investigation. "You say she wears it when she's nervous but trying to appear confident. But she's worn it before when lying to us, about the surprise party, about your phone." "Those weren't really lies," Mia countered. "They were surprises, things she was excited about but needed to keep secret temporarily." "Maybe this is the same thing." Maybe she's planning to surprise us with something after the case is over, like a vacation or something. It was a generous interpretation, one that spoke more to Mia's desire to believe in her mother's integrity than to the most straightforward reading of the evidence. But wasn't that what we all did for the people we loved? Look for the most generous possible interpretation of their actions? Maybe, I conceded, though I wasn't entirely convinced. So what now? Mia shrugged, gathering up her evidence portfolio. I did my part, delivered the facts. What you do with them is up to you. Though if you ask me, which you technically didn't, but I'm volunteering my opinion anyway, you should just talk to Mom. She paused at the door, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable than her 16 years. And, Dad? Maybe stop assuming the worst? It's kind of freaking me out. After she left, I stared at the neatly organized evidence of our week-long investigation. The whole thing suddenly seemed ridiculous. A middle-aged environmental lawyer and his teenage daughter playing amateur detectives, constructing elaborate theories based on lipstick choices and credit card statements. All because I'd been too insecure to simply ask my wife why she'd lied about a book. The thing about marriages is that they're not unlike long-term ecological studies. Fascinating organisms with complex interdependencies that you think you understand, until some seemingly insignificant variable changes and suddenly your entire model collapses. Caroline had always been my known quantity, my stable ecosystem. The thought that I might have fundamentally misunderstood some aspect of her was more destabilizing than I cared to admit. I was still contemplating this when the front door opened and closed, followed by the distinctive sound of Caroline's heels. On the hardwood floor, I quickly gathered up Mia's evidence portfolio and shoved it into my desk drawer, feeling absurdly like a child hiding a failed test from a parent. "David!" Caroline's voice floated up the stairs. "Are you home?" "In my office," I called back, attempting to arrange my face into an expression that didn't scream, "I've been investigating you for days, and briefly suspected you were having an affair with your speaking coach." Caroline appeared in the doorway, looking relaxed and slightly flushed from her spa appointment. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the law student I'd fallen in love with than the polished attorney she'd become. "You're working on a Saturday?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "That's usually my department." "Just catching up on some emails," I lied, the irony of my deception not lost on me. "How was the spa?" "Good. Great, actually." She moved into the room, perching on the edge of my desk in a casual intimacy we hadn't shared in longer than I cared to admit. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," I quipped automatically, falling back on our old pattern. It was Caroline's line, typically delivered with an arched eyebrow whenever I announced I had an idea. She smiled, the genuine one that reached her eyes, not the careful professional one she deployed at networking events. "Very. But I've decided something." "Oh?" I managed, suddenly nervous for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. "I'm done with book club." I blinked, thrown completely off whatever script I'd been mentally preparing. "You... what?" "Book club," she repeated, as if I might have misheard, rather than being confused by the non sequitur. "I'm quitting. It's not really... well, it's not what I thought it would be." "I see," I said, though I absolutely did not see. "Any particular reason?" Caroline looked down, fiddling with a pen on my desk in an uncharacteristic display of nervousness. "It was never really a book club, David." Ah, here it was, the confession. I braced myself, unsure whether I was more afraid she'd confirm my worst fears or Mia's perfectly reasonable explanation. "I've been working with a speaking coach," she continued, still not meeting my eyes. "For the Westlake case, I've been having some issues with anxiety during presentations lately." I tried to keep my face neutral despite the wave of relief washing over me. "That seems perfectly reasonable. Why not just tell us that?" She laughed, short and self-deprecating. "Because it's embarrassing? I'm a trial attorney. Public speaking is literally in my job description. Having panic attacks before presentations isn't exactly partner material. Panic attacks? I repeated, genuinely concerned now. Caroline. When did this start? She sighed, finally looking up at me. About 6 months ago. After that disaster with the Jensen arbitration, I completely froze during my closing statement. Had to call for a brief recess. It was mortifying. I vaguely remembered the Jensen case. Something about contract violations that Caroline had been certain was an easy win. She'd come home unusually quiet after the final day, attributing her mood to a headache. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, softly. Because I'm not supposed to have weaknesses? She offered with a wry smile. Because I've spent my entire career being twice as prepared and half as emotional as every man in the room? Because admitting I suddenly can't do the thing I've been doing successfully for 15 years feels like failure? Each question landed like a gentle indictment of the distance that had grown between us, a distance I'd barely noticed until confronted with burgundy lipstick and recycled books. So Michael is your speaking coach, I said, the statement somewhere between a question and confirmation. Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know about Michael? Shit. I scrambled for a plausible explanation that didn't involve stalking my own wife. I, saw a text notification on your phone the other day. Just the name, Michael SC. I assumed SC was for speaking coach. Very detective-like of you, she said, but her tone was amused rather than accusatory. Yes, Michael Sullivan. He specializes in performance anxiety for professionals. He's been helping me develop techniques to manage the panic responses, hence the weekly dinners at Morton's, public speaking practice in an actual public setting. Is it working? I asked, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. It is, actually. She smiled, looking slightly embarrassed but also proud. I've been implementing his techniques during depositions, and last week I made it through an entire client presentation without feeling like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. That's great, Caroline. I reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. But I still don't understand the book club cover story. Why not just tell us you were seeing a coach? She sighed, squeezing my hand. Because I didn't want to worry you, or have to explain to Mia that her super competent mother was falling apart over something as basic as public speaking. And honestly, I needed to process it myself first, to see if I could actually fix it before admitting it was broken. It was such a perfectly Caroline explanation. Pragmatic, self-contained, focused on resolution rather than emotional processing. It was also, I realized with a pang, exactly the kind of thinking that had been gradually widening the space between us, this tendency to handle things alone, to present only finished solutions rather than ongoing struggles. I get that, I said carefully. But you know you can tell me things that aren't resolved yet, right? That's kind of the point of marriage, having someone to help carry the unresolved stuff. I know, she said, though her tone suggested this was more theoretical knowledge than lived practice. I'm trying to be better about that, which is why I'm telling you now. Because you've resolved it? No, she admitted, because I've realized I don't have to fix everything alone. It was a small concession, but significant coming from Caroline, who approached vulnerability the way most people approach active volcanoes, with extreme caution and specialized equipment. Well, for what it's worth, I appreciate you telling me, I said, trying to ignore the voice in my head pointing out that she was only telling me after I'd practically caught her in the act. And I'm here if you want to talk more about it, or practice presentations, or whatever you need. She smiled, leaning forward to kiss me lightly. Thank you, and I'm sorry about the book club lie. That was unnecessary. Water under the bridge, I assured her, mentally calculating how quickly I could dismantle Operation Wednesday alibi and ensure all evidence was permanently destroyed. Before Caroline's lawyer-honed instincts uncovered our investigation. She stood, stretching slightly. I should go shower before dinner. Mia and I are going shopping for her college visit's wardrobe, apparently. when did our daughter start caring about clothes? Around the same time she started developing alarming detective skills, I murmured. Before I could stop myself. What was that? Nothing, I said quickly. Just teenage development. Unpredictable stuff. Caroline gave me an odd look but didn't pursue it. Right. Well, I'll see you at dinner. After she left, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. On one hand, immense relief. No affair, no profound deception, just my wife being characteristically private about a professional challenge. On the other hand, a lingering unease about how easily we'd fallen into separate lives, how readily I'd assumed the worst, how completely I'd missed her struggle with anxiety. I pulled out my phone and texted Mia. You were right. Speaking coach. Crisis averted. Details later. Her response came seconds later. Vindicated. My detective skills are clearly superior to yours. P.S. Does this mean I get extra ice cream? Pretty sure solving parental crises deserves at least 2 scoops. I smiled, feeling the tension of the past week finally begin to dissipate. 3 scoops minimum. Also, let's never speak of Operation Wednesday Alibi again. Deal. But I'm keeping the evidence portfolio for my college applications. Extracurricular activities, amateur surveillance, and marital crisis management. I laughed out loud, pocketing my phone and heading downstairs to start dinner. Crisis averted indeed, though I made a mental note to have a serious conversation with Mia about boundaries, privacy, and the legality of accessing other people's financial records. Tomorrow, perhaps, after ice cream. The following Wednesday arrived with considerably less dread than its predecessor. Caroline had announced at breakfast that it would be her final session with Michael, a graduation of sorts from his coaching program. She'd even invited Mia and me to join them afterward for a celebratory dinner. I think it's time you met the man who's been taking up my Wednesday nights, she'd said with a self-deprecating smile. Besides, Michael's been hearing about you two, for months. He probably thinks you're imaginary at this point. I'd agreed with an enthusiasm that carefully masked my relief at being formally introduced to the man I'd briefly suspected of stealing my wife. Mia had been less subtle, practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of meeting the central figure in our investigation. Try not to interrogate him, I warned as we waited outside the Seattle Center for Public Speaking that evening. This isn't a debriefing of a hostile witness. Please, Mia scoffed, though she was practically bouncing on her toes. I'm just excited to meet Mom's secret coach person. Plus, I have like 17 questions about public speaking techniques for my college interviews. Just remember, we know nothing about his text messages, dinner receipts, or Mom's burgundy. Lipstick, she recited, rolling her eyes. I got it, Dad. I can be cool. I sincerely doubted this, given that Mia's version of cool typically involved excessive finger guns and obscure references to quantum physics, but I didn't have time to press the point before the building door opened, and Caroline emerged, followed by Michael. In person, without the filter of paranoia and drizzle-streaked car windows, he looked less like a potential homewrecker and more like what he actually was. A professional man in his 50s with kind eyes and the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. David Mia, Caroline said, looking happier and more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. This is Michael Sullivan. Michael, my husband David, and our daughter Mia. The famous family, Michael said warmly, shaking my hand. Caroline talks about you so much I feel like I already know you. Likewise, I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie given how thoroughly Mia had researched his professional background. Thank you for helping Caroline with her presentation skills. She did all the hard work, he demurred. I just provided the framework. So do you help a lot of lawyers with public speaking anxiety? Mia asked, ignoring my subtle warning glance. Because that seems ironic, right? Like dentists with cavities or chefs who can't taste? Michael laughed, seeming genuinely amused rather than put off by her directness. More than you'd think. Professional identities can actually make anxiety worse. The higher the expectations, the harder the fall. But your mom has made remarkable progress. He's being kind, Caroline interjected. 3 months ago, I was having full-blown panic attacks before speaking to groups larger than 5. Now I'm actually looking forward to the Westlake presentation. There was something different about Caroline as she said this, a vulnerability mixed with pride that I rarely saw in her professional persona. It struck me suddenly that I'd been seeing only fragments of my wife for longer than I cared to admit. The competent attorney, the organized mother, the efficient household manager, without really seeing the whole person with her fears and struggles and triumphs, just as she, perhaps, had been seeing fragments of me. "Well, we're very glad to have her back on Wednesday nights," I said, surprising myself with the genuine warmth in my voice. "Our ice cream consumption has been dangerously high in her absence." "Mint chip?" Michael nodded seriously. "For academic stress and calculus-induced existential crises. Caroline mentioned your system." Mia's eyes widened with delight. "She told you about ice cream night?" "Mom never tells anyone about ice cream night. She says it encourages nutritional anarchy." I believe her exact words were a diabetic nightmare that somehow became our most meaningful family ritual, Michael said with a smile. "She's quite proud of it, actually, and of both of you." I glanced at Caroline, who looked briefly embarrassed before shrugging with a small smile. "What?" "It's true, even if it does violate every nutritional guideline I supposedly enforce." The moment felt significant somehow. This acknowledgement that our silly ice cream ritual had made it into her conversations with others, that she valued our family quirks enough to share them with pride rather than embarrassment, that perhaps the emotional distance I'd been feeling wasn't quite as vast as I'd feared. As we walked to dinner, Mia peppered Michael with questions about public speaking techniques, Caroline occasionally interjecting with anecdotes from her sessions. I found myself watching my wife. The animation in her face, the easy way she referred to her anxiety without the shame that had kept her silent for months, the genuine affection with which she looked at both Mia and me. Had I really thought this? Woman could be living a double life. Had I been so caught up in my own insecurities that I'd constructed an entire alternate reality based on burgundy lipstick and a recycled book? At the restaurant, after we'd ordered, and Michael was deep in conversation with Mia about the neurological basis of performance anxiety, Caroline leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for coming tonight. I know this whole thing has been strange." "Not at all," I assured her. "I'm glad we could be here. And I'm glad you told us about the coaching." She hesitated, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Were you worried about the late nights and the book club story?" I considered lying, a small, protective deception to spare her feelings and my dignity. But the past week had involved enough deception for several marriages. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Not at first, but eventually, yes." She nodded, processing this. "I'm sorry, I didn't think about how it might look. I was so focused on fixing the problem that I didn't consider collateral effects." "It's okay," I said, meaning it. "But maybe next time you're struggling with something, consider letting me in earlier. Being fixing it together people instead of already fixed it people." Caroline smiled, that genuine one that still made my heart skip after all these years. "I'm trying. It's not easy for me, but I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do," I said, reaching for her hand under the table. Across from us, Mia was explaining to a clearly amused Michael the statistical correlation between ice cream flavors and emotional states, complete with animated hand, gestures, and what appeared to be an impromptu graph drawn on a napkin. "Our daughter is either going to win a Nobel Prize or be investigated by the NSA," Caroline observed, watching Mia with equal parts pride and bewilderment. "Let's hope for the former," I replied. I don't think my heart could take another investigation. Caroline gave me a curious look, but before she could question the comment, Mia dragged us both into her conversation about whether public speaking anxiety could be cured by appropriate ice cream therapy. And just like that, we were simply us, again, a slightly strange, entirely imperfect family navigating the complex ecosystem of marriage and adolescence and middle age with varying degrees of success. No affairs, No secret double lives, just ordinary people trying their best to understand each other across the inevitable distances that form in any long-term relationship. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed and Caroline and I were preparing for sleep, I noticed her reaching for the burgundy lipstick on her vanity. "Special occasion?" I asked lightly, trying to keep any trace of suspicion from my voice. She met my eyes in the mirror, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "In a way. I was thinking about what you said, about fixing things together instead of alone. And that requires burgundy lipstick?" "This particular thing does." She applied it carefully, blotting with a tissue just as she'd done on that first suspicious Wednesday. "I've been preparing a different kind of presentation with Michael, a more personal one." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "The Westlake case isn't the only thing happening next month," she continued, turning to face me. "It's our anniversary. 17 years. "I am aware," I assured her, slightly confused. "I've already booked the dinner reservation at Canlis, unless—" "You've developed anxiety about anniversary celebrations, too?" She laughed, shaking her head. "No, but I have been working with Michael on something else. A surprise for you." Understanding dawned slowly. "The burgundy lipstick. You wear it when you're nervous about something but trying to appear confident. When you're planning surprises?" She looked impressed. "That's remarkably observant of you." "Yes, I've been nervous about this particular surprise because it's out of my comfort zone." "Are you going to tell me what it is?" "That would defeat the purpose of a surprise," she pointed out. "But I will tell you that it involves public speaking, which is why Michael has been helping me prepare. And I will also tell you that I love you, even when I'm terrible at showing it." "You're not terrible at showing it," I protested. "You're just selectively expressive." "That's a very generous interpretation. I prefer to think of it as an accurate translation of Caroline's speak into standard emotional language." She laughed, rising from the vanity to join me on the edge of the bed. 17 years, and you're still working on the translation." "It's a lifelong project," I agreed, pulling her closer. "One I'm fully committed to." As she leaned in to kiss me, I caught the faint scent of her perfume mingled with the particular chemical note of that burgundy lipstick, once a warning sign, now transformed into something else entirely. A reminder that sometimes the things we fear most in our relationships are simply misunderstood signals, opportunities for deeper connection if only we're brave enough to investigate with open hearts instead of suspicious minds. And if a small part of me still wondered what exactly Caroline was planning that required both public speaking coaching and her nervous but confident lipstick, well, that was a mystery I was content to let unfold on its own timeline. After all, some surprises are worth the wait. The Wednesday alibi. There's a particular shade of burgundy lipstick my wife wears only when she's about to lie to me. It's her tell, though I suspect she'd be horrified to learn she has one. A subtle crimson flag that I've catalogued over 16 years of marriage, alongside other critical data points like hates cilantro with religious fervor, and will absolutely cry during dog food commercials but never at actual funerals. I first noticed it 7 years ago when she told me she wouldn't dream of throwing me a surprise 40th birthday party. Her lips stained the color of expensive Merlot as she kissed my cheek. 3 days later, I found myself in our backyard, surrounded by everyone I'd ever met, wearing the forced smile of an introvert, ambushed by well-intentioned extroversion. I spotted it again when she insisted she absolutely did not buy our daughter Mia a phone for Christmas 2 years early, the same burgundy shade gleaming under department store lighting as she steered me away from the electronics section. So when Caroline emerged from our master bathroom on a Wednesday evening wearing that particular lipstick, for a book club, no less, something in my brain's marital surveillance system pinged like a submarine detecting an anomaly in otherwise empty waters. "Book club night," she said, adjusting a pair of earrings I'd given her last anniversary. "Don't wait up. We're discussing the secret history, and Diane always turns literary analysis into an Olympic event." I nodded from my position on the bed, where I'd been sorting through emails that didn't actually require immediate attention, but provided an excellent excuse to avoid starting the treadmill routine I'd been promising my doctor since my last physical. "The Secret History," I repeated. "Donna Tartt, right? Isn't that the one with the college classic students who murder someone?" Caroline's eyes briefly met mine in the mirror, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "That's the one." Angela picked it. Bit dark for my taste, but you know how she loves anything with morally ambiguous intellectuals. What Caroline didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, is that she'd left her copy of The Secret History on our kitchen counter 3 months ago, complete with her characteristic margin notes and the coffee stain on page 142 where she'd gasped at a plot twist and upended her mug. I'd teased her about it for days. We'd had entire conversations about whether we could technically be classified as morally ambiguous intellectuals. Verdict: I was too straightforward, she was too ethical, we both fell short on the intellectual requirement according to our daughter. I watched her apply a final coat of that burgundy lipstick, blotting it carefully with a tissue. "Have fun," I said, the words perfectly normal while my brain performed high-level quantum calculations involving book clubs, lipstick, and the statistical probability that my wife of 16 years was lying to me. "Don't let Mia stay up too late. She has that calculus test tomorrow," Caroline said, dropping the lipstick into a small clutch purse that definitely couldn't accommodate a hardcover novel. After she left, I sat in the peculiar silence that follows. A departure you're not entirely sure how to categorize. It wasn't the first time Caroline had gone to her Wednesday book club. The gathering had materialized about 2 months ago, a standing appointment with 5 other women, mostly colleagues from her law firm and a couple of friends from her college days who'd recently moved to the area. What was new was the lie, or at least what appeared to be a lie, and if she was lying about the book, what else might not be true? The book club itself? The people attending? The entire Wednesday night enterprise? I shook my head, dislodging the thought before it could take a root. Caroline wasn't the type. We'd been together since law school. She, the ambitious, brilliant student who color-coded her case briefs, me, the more relaxed environmental law devotee who'd occasionally raid her immaculate notes when I fell behind. We'd built a life on complementary differences and mutual respect. She took the corporate law path that paid for our comfortably upscale lifestyle. I chose the nonprofit environmental route that gave me moral superiority and significantly more free time with our daughter. It worked. We worked. But that burgundy lipstick kept flashing in my mind like a warning sign. "Dad." Mia's voice echoed up the stairs, breaking my spiral of mild marital paranoia. "Are we doing ice cream night or what? I've got like 1,600 pages of calculus to pretend to understand." Ice cream night. Of course. Our Wednesday tradition when Caroline was out. A carefully calibrated balance of dairy consumption and mathematical commiseration. I pushed myself off the bed, relegating the mystery of the recycled book club selection to the part of my brain labeled "probably nothing but let's see if more evidence materializes." Downstairs, I found my 16-year-old daughter sprawled across our couch, her dark hair, Caroline's hair, spilling over a calculus textbook that appeared to be written in some alien language consisting entirely of Greek symbols and despair. "Mint. Chip for test anxiety?" I asked, already knowing the answer. We had a system after all. Chocolate for emotional distress, mint chip for academic challenges, strawberry for celebrations, vanilla with elaborate toppings for existential crises. "God, yes," she groaned, flipping a page with the enthusiasm of someone turning over a particularly disappointing playing card. "Remind me again why I thought taking AP Calc was a good idea." "Because you're genetically predisposed to overachievement and terrible decision-making," I offered, heading to the freezer. "Your mother's ambitious academic standards combined with my stubborn refusal to back down from challenges. Really, it's a miracle you didn't decide to simultaneously learn Sanskrit and train for an ultramarathon." Mia snorted, abandoning her textbook to follow me into the kitchen. "Don't give me ideas. College applications are coming up and fluent in Sanskrit while running ungodly distances would definitely stand out." I pulled 2 pints from the freezer. Mint chip for her. Chocolate for me, despite the absence of any immediate emotional crisis. Call it preventative medicine. Speaking of Mom, Mia said, accepting her pint with the reverence of a priest receiving holy relics. Since when does she wear lipstick to book club? Isn't that like wearing high heels to a dog park? So, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. The parental half of my brain made a note to worry later about my teenage daughter's disturbingly astute observational skills. The increasingly suspicious husband half seized on this external validation like a drowning man grabbing a floating debris. You notice that too? I asked, aiming for casual and landing somewhere in the vicinity of desperately seeking confirmation of concerns I'm not ready to articulate. Mia rolled her eyes with the particular exasperation teenagers reserve for parents who state the obvious. Dad, she was wearing the fancy lipstick, and she changed her outfit 3 times. I have literally never seen her change clothes for book club. Usually she just takes off her work blazer and calls it a transformation. I handed her a spoon, buying time as I mentally sorted through possible explanations that didn't involve the C word, cheating, a concept so foreign to my understanding of Caroline that my brain rejected it like incompatible code. Maybe it's a special book club night, I offered, someone's birthday or something. Mia dug into her ice cream with skeptical vigor, and maybe I'll spontaneously understand calculus through mint chip osmosis, but I'm not betting my GPA on it. I leaned against the counter, contemplating my daughter with the strange double vision that sometimes overcomes parents, seeing simultaneously the tiny baby who once fell asleep on my chest and the nearly grown woman currently demolishing frozen dairy products while making astute observations about potential parental deception. Let's not jump to conclusions, I said, though it wasn't clear which of us needed the caution more. You know your mother. She's the most straightforward person we know. Remember how she told the neighbor his new artistic landscaping looked like the aftermath of a lawnmower exorcism? Mia laughed around a spoonful of mint chip. Yeah, but that's different. Mom has no filter for other people's feelings. She's pathologically honest when it comes to, external stuff. But have you noticed she gets weird when it's about herself? Remember when she had that root canal and pretended she was fine even though half her face was basically paralyzed? That's just stoicism, I argued, though something about Mia's observation resonated uncomfortably. Your mother doesn't like to appear vulnerable. Exactly. Mia pointed her spoon at me like a professor making a crucial point. So if she's doing something that makes her feel vulnerable, something she's not 100% confident about, she might actually lie about it. I frowned, stabbing at my ice cream with more force than necessary. That's actually quite insightful. I know, right? She looked pleased with herself. AP psychology is way more useful than calc. We ate in silence for a moment, both contemplating the mystery of Caroline's burgundy lipstick and recycled book selection. So what do we do? Mia finally asked. Just straight up ask her? Because I'm guessing that'll go about as well as the time I asked Grandma Helen about her friend Stanley who kept leaving his denture cream in her bathroom. I winced at the memory. Helen had not appreciated the interrogation, and family dinners had been awkward for months afterward. No, we need more information before confronting her, I said, suddenly feeling like a character in one of those procedural crime shows Caroline pretends to disdain, but secretly binge-watches. We need to, gather evidence? Oh my God. Mia's face lit up with unholy glee. Are we investigating Mom? Actually spying on her? Because that is simultaneously the worst idea ever and the most exciting thing to happen in this house since we found out the Richardson's cat was using our flower beds as a litter box. We are not spying, I clarified, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were at least partially a lie. We're just being more observant, looking for patterns, drawing reasonable conclusions from available data. Right? Mia nodded solemnly, though her eyes still sparkled with mischievous enthusiasm. Totally reasonable, not at all invasive pattern recognition. So what's our first move, Sherlock? And that, I suppose, is how Project Wednesday Alibi was born. A father-daughter investigation into the mystery of Caroline's book club that would eventually teach me more about my wife, my daughter, and myself than I ever expected to learn on a weeknight while consuming inadvisable amounts of ice cream. Our first investigative breakthrough came the following morning when Mia texted me from school. Major intel. Mom left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while she showered. Calendar says SC session 7:30 p.m. for yesterday. WTF is SC? Secret conspiracy? Salacious canoodling? Suspiciously cryptic? I stared at my phone, momentarily distracted from the environmental impact report I was supposed to be reviewing. My first instinct was to reprimand Mia for snooping through her mother's phone, a clear violation of privacy that I absolutely should not encourage or benefit from. My second, less noble instinct was to ask for screenshots. Before I could respond, another text arrived. Don't worry, didn't go through anything else. Just saw it open on the calendar when I was checking if she put in my dentist app to its, which she didn't, BTW. But seriously, SC? I typed back. Maybe it's the initials of someone in the book club, or the restaurant they meet at? Dad, use your brain. If it was book club, it would say BC not SC. This is obvious code. I sighed, setting down my phone and staring out my office window at the Seattle drizzle. SC could stand for literally hundreds of things. Soccer club, school committee, salmon celebration. Unlikely, but Caroline had surprised me before. But if it wasn't book club, why lie about it? The question nagged at me throughout the day, interfering with my ability to concentrate on wetland conservation regulations and the quarterly budget report. By the time I arrived home that evening, I'd cycled through a range of possibilities from the innocent, surprise committee planning something for Mia's upcoming birthday, to the concerning, support counseling for some issue she didn't want to worry us about, to the frankly catastrophic secret coupling with a nameless, faceless interloper. Caroline was already home, chopping vegetables for dinner with the precise, efficient movements that characterized everything she did. No wasted motion, no unnecessary flourishes, just clean, decisive action. It was what had first attracted me to her in law school, that sense of absolute certainty, of knowing exactly what she wanted and exactly how to get it. "How was your day?" she asked, barely looking up from the cutting board where she was transforming a bell pepper into perfectly uniform strips. "Fine," I replied, hating how the word stuck slightly in my throat. "Mostly paperwork and meetings. You know how it is." She nodded, scraping the pepper into a waiting pan. "The Westlake development case is heating up. We might be heading to litigation sooner than expected." I leaned against the counter, studying my wife's profile. She looked exactly the same as she had yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, minimal makeup, the faint line between her eyebrows that appeared when she was concentrating. "Caroline, the constant in my life for nearly 2 decades, sounds stressful," I offered, searching her face for what? Signs of deception, evidence of a secret life. "Maybe you should take a break tonight. Skip book club and we could watch that documentary on the Supreme Court you've been wanting to see." The knife paused almost imperceptibly before resuming its rhythm against the cutting board. "I can't," she said, reaching for an onion. "Angela's counting on me to back her up on some interpretation of the narrative structure. You know how Diane always tries to dominate the discussion." I didn't actually know that, having never met Diane or Angela or any of the book club members. In 16 years of marriage, our social circles had gradually separated. Hers populated by high-powered attorneys and corporate connections, mine consisting of environmental activists, the parents of Mia's friends, and a surprising number of people I'd met through my brief but passionate foray into competitive ultimate frisbee. "Right," I said, pushing away from the counter. "Well, don't let Diane steamroll you." Caroline's laugh held a note I couldn't quite identify. "I never do." Dinner passed with Mia shooting me significant looks every time Caroline mentioned book club, which fortunately wasn't often. Our daughter had inherited her mother's intelligence in my expressive face, a combination that made her spectacularly bad at hiding her thoughts. If Caroline noticed Mia's exaggerated eyebrow movements, she gave no indication. After dinner, I retreated to my home office, ostensibly to finish reviewing the impact report, but actually to contemplate the mystery of SC. I found myself staring at my bookshelf, eyes landing on a framed photo from our honeymoon, Caroline and me on a beach in Maui, sun-drunk and deliriously happy, her smile so wide it looked like it might split her face in half. The Caroline I knew then wouldn't have hidden things from me. But then, the David she knew wouldn't have been silently cataloging her behaviors for inconsistencies instead of just asking her directly what was going on. When had we become these people? These careful, circling satellites maintaining stable orbits but never quite colliding? I was still contemplating this uncomfortable question when my computer pinged with an incoming email. From Mia. Subject line: Operation Wednesday Alibi Status Update. I clicked it open to find a bulleted list. Checked Mom's browser history. She never clears it because I have nothing to hide. LOL irony. Lots of legal research stuff. Boring. But then, multiple searches for public speaking techniques and overcoming presentation anxiety. Also, Professional Speaking Coach Seattle and How to Speak Confidently to Large Groups. Theory, SC, Speaking Coach. I stared at the screen, processing this new information. Public Speaking Coach? It seemed anticlimactic. Carolyn was already an accomplished speaker. She regularly presented arguments in court, led meetings at her firm, gave occasional guest lectures at the law school. But a small voice in the back of my head reminded me that her biggest case of the year was coming up. A high-profile corporate merger with significant regulatory hurdles. The kind of case that could make or break partnership track. Still, why? Hide it? Why not just tell us she was working with a coach to prepare? I typed back a reply. Interesting theory. But why would she lie about it? Mia's response came almost immediately. Duh. Mom hates admitting weakness. Remember when she got food poisoning at Aunt Janet's wedding and still gave her maid of honor speech while basically dying? I did remember. Caroline had excused herself immediately after the speech and spent the remainder of the reception alternating between violently emptying her stomach and insisting she was perfectly fine while looking alarmingly gray. If Mia was right, and it was still a big if, it would explain the secrecy but not the burgundy lipstick. Caroline didn't dress up for professional development sessions. She dressed up for... The thought I'd been avoiding crystallized suddenly. She dressed up for people she wanted to impress, people whose attention and approval she valued, people like the mysterious speaking coach who was taking up her Wednesday evenings. I closed the email, a new uncomfortable feeling settling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the slightly questionable leftover Thai food I'd had for lunch. The following Wednesday arrived with the inexorability of a slowly approaching train. I'd spent the week vacillating between rational explanations for Caroline's behavior and increasingly elaborate scenarios involving secret lives and hidden passions. Mia, meanwhile, had embraced her role as junior detective with alarming enthusiasm. Her updates now included satellite tracking of Caroline's favorite travel mug, observed at the firm until 5:45 p.m., then disappeared until reappearance at home the following morning. Analysis of Caroline's wardrobe choices. Wednesday outfits, averaging 37% more formal than typical weekday attire, and a detailed spreadsheet of Caroline's tells when discussing book club, increased hair touching, decreased eye contact, frequent references to Angela's opinions as if invoking a third party lent credibility. We should follow her tonight, Mia announced, as we ate our pre-calculus test mint chip ice cream. Caroline had left 15 minutes earlier, wearing not the burgundy lipstick, but something equally dramatic in a shade Mia identified as power red. Absolutely not, I said, though the same thought had occurred to me approximately 47 times since breakfast. That would be a complete violation of her privacy and trust, says the man who just spent 20 minutes Googling speaking. Coach Seattle Michael, because Mom's phone showed a text notification from Michael SC this morning. I winced. She had me there. That's different. I didn't actually read the text. Only because she picked up her phone too quickly, Mia pointed out, waving her spoon accusingly. Face it, Dad. We're way past the moral high ground. We're basically swamp creatures at this point, wallowing in the mud of suspicion and deceit. That's quite the metaphor. AP English, she shrugged. But seriously, don't you want to know? Like, 100%? No doubt about it, know what's going on? Because I've got Madison's car tonight. She's at her dad's, and said I could borrow it if I wanted to go to the library. She raised her eyebrows meaningfully. The library. I should have said no. I should have been the adult, the voice of reason, the ethical compass in this increasingly questionable father-daughter bonding experience. Instead, I heard myself asking, what time does Madison need her car back? 20 minutes later, we were parked across the street from a nondescript office building in downtown Seattle, watching the entrance like a pair of spectacularly unqualified private investigators. Are you sure this is the place? I asked, slumping, down in the passenger seat of Madison's ancient Honda Civic, which smelled faintly of French fries and more strongly of what I suspected was illicit vape juice. Positive, Mia replied, not taking her eyes off the building. I tracked Mom's location history. She's been here every Wednesday for the past 2 months. I decided not to ask how exactly Mia had accessed her mother's location data. Some parental questions are better left unasked, especially when you're actively participating in the questionable behavior. There's a lot of different businesses in that building, I pointed out. Dentists, accountants, probably some therapists, and the Seattle Center for Public Speaking on the 4th floor. Mia finished. I checked the directory online. Oh. I felt a complicated mixture of pride in my daughter's thoroughness and concern about her potentially felonious future. Well, that supports your speaking coach theory. Except, Mia said, leaning forward suddenly, the center closed an hour ago. Look at their hours. She pointed to a sign visible through the lobby windows. Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, it's almost 8. I frowned, squinting through the drizzle at the building entrance. Maybe they have special evening sessions? Or private coaching after hours? Maybe, Mia conceded, though she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe... She cut off abruptly as the building door opened and a figure emerged. Unmistakably Caroline, even from this distance. She was laughing, her head thrown back in the uninhibited way rarely seen outside our home. And beside her... Who's that? Mia whispered, as if Caroline might hear us from across the street and through closed car windows. The man walking with Caroline was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confident posture that comes from knowing exactly how much space you occupy in the world. Even from our vantage point, I could see he was handsome in a polished, professional way. Salt and pepper hair, well-cut suit, animated hand gestures as he continued whatever conversation had Caroline so amused. I don't know, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. A colleague, maybe. A colleague she's meeting secretly on Wednesday nights. Mia's tone made it clear what she thought of this explanation. We watched in silence as Caroline and the mystery man walked to the corner. There was a moment, brief, but unmistakable, where his hand rested on the small of her back as they waited for the light to change. A casual touch, the kind exchanged between people comfortable in each other's physical space, the kind of touch that sent a cold spike of something unpleasant straight through my chest. They're heading toward Morton's, Mia observed as they crossed the street. Morton's was an upscale steakhouse about a block away, known for its expense account clientele and intimate lighting. Not the kind of place you'd go for a casual professional meeting. We should go, I said suddenly, overwhelmed by the sense that we'd crossed a line, that we were seeing something not meant for us. This isn't right. Mia looked at me with an expression that somehow managed to convey both teenage exasperation and genuine concern. Dad, don't you think it's a little late for moral qualms? We're already here. Don't you want to know who he is? Did I? Part of me, the rational, logical part, said yes, absolutely. I needed data to make informed decisions. But another part, the part currently experiencing what felt remarkably like heartbreak, wasn't sure I could handle witnessing whatever might happen over dinner at Morton's. "I know who he is," I said quietly. "You do? Who?" I shook my head, unable to articulate the identity I'd constructed for this man in the space of 30 seconds. Rival. Replacement. The answer to whatever question Caroline had stopped asking me to fulfill. "Let's go home," I said instead. "I've seen enough." Mia opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, studying my face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she simply nodded, started the car, and pulled away from the curb without further comment.